Test, test. Good morning, my brothers and my sisters. We thank you for joining us for worship on this beautiful August morning. God has been good. I know God has been good because you are moving around in spite of all the things that are going on in your life, in spite of all of the ups and downs, the rainy days that sometimes outweigh the sunny days. We give God praise for who God is. And I thank God for you joining us on this morning. We're live here at the sanctuary of the 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church on this beautiful fourth Sunday of the month of August. This beautiful fourth Sunday of the month of August, and we say thank God for you and for being a part of our virtual fellowship this morning. So for those of you who are listening by way of dial pad, we say thank you. For those of you who are watching by way of YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, we say thank you. For those of you who have been supporting the ministry while we have been virtually worshiping for the past 18 months, we say thank you for you being a part of what we're doing. We're inching closer to a return to worship, while yet we're keeping our eye on vaccination numbers and the Delta variant, etc. I'll talk more about that at the end of worship today. But we are targeting a homecoming return. Coming home for homecoming is what we're calling it, and that is September the 19th. We had initially said September the 5th, but we pushed it back a couple of weeks to give us a little bit more time to get some more work done here in the building, while also continuing to look at the numbers in the community. We don't want to be a part of any mass spreading, etc. And so we continue to encourage all of our members to get vaccinated, all of our members to continue to be smart, even those who are vaccinated. Wear your mask out in public, watch who you're around, the connections that you are engaged with, because the virus is still spreading. Our children and youth are going to bless us. A couple of years back, they shared on, I think, this awesome Children and Youth Sunday, and I believe this ministry is going to bless you. For those of you who give and support the ministry. We offer you this opportunity to do that right now. We offer you the opportunity to do that right now. If you're listening or watching and you want to give, you're not an automatic giver. You are prompted to give on Sunday mornings. I intentionally, at the beginning of worship and at the end of worship, give you these opportunities to give. So you can go to our website, smzbc.org, give online. Go to our website, smzbc.org, give online. Or you can do Cash App, $ SMZBC, or Venmo, SMZBC. We do Zelle. You can do giving at SMZBC. If you're watching, I haven't committed the text to give number to memory yet, but if you're watching, it's right there on the screen in front of you. And for those of you who are listening, you can always drop off gifts at the church, 14 West Duval Street, Richmond, Virginia, 23220, or you can mail it. Same address, 14 West Duval Street, Richmond, Virginia, 23220. The trustees here right now who will take the gift if you want to drop it off. Listen, let our children and youth ministry bless you. We've gone back a couple of years, so parents, grandparents, aunties, uncles who are watching, some of your babies have grown up. They're not even kids anymore. They're adults now. But let the ministry bless you. And then we're going to come back, and I've got a word that I'm preaching today from 2 Kings, the 19th chapter. 2 Kings, 19th chapter, verses 14 through 19. Let the young people bless your heart. Again, we thank God for our young people. I'm going to ask that you turn with me to Second Kings, and I believe that God has a word for us from the 19th chapter of Second Kings, starting at verse 14, and I'm going to read down through verse 19. 2 Kings, starting at chapter 19, and I'm going to read down through verses 14 through 19, the Message translation. These are the words that are recorded. Hezekiah took the letter from the envoy and read it. He went to the temple of God and spread it out before God. And Hezekiah prayed. Oh, how he prayed. God, God of Israel, seated in majesty on the cherubim throne, you are the one and only God, sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, maker of heaven, maker of earth. Open your eyes, God, and listen. Open your eyes and look. Look at this letter. Sennacherib has sent a brazen insult to the living God. The facts are true, O God. The kings of Assyria have laid waste countries and kingdoms, huge bonfires they made of their gods. They are no gods handmade from wood and stone. But now, O God, our God, save us from raw Assyrian power. Make all the kingdoms on earth know that you are God, the one and only God. I'm going to preach today from the sermon subject, Prayer Changes Things. Every country that Assyria attacked at the time they defeated, countries of different sizes and military strengths, varied advantages and disadvantages. In terms of geographical space, countries of differing levels of leadership acumen, and they all failed to Assyria. And all of these fallen nations believed in their own gods, though their gods were man-made. They believed in these gods to deliver them, and they discovered after being defeated that their gods were powerless to do so. Now Hezekiah, the 13th king of Judah, holds in his hands an arrogant letter from King Sennacherib, who is the king of Assyria. And essentially, the message is to really convey one thought. All of the others we have defeated, and Judah, we now are coming for you. And when we saturate your land, we're going to imprison your people. We're going to destroy your belief systems. We're going to exercise our willpower over you, and our track record proves that you are to carry a very serious concern. Listen today, my brothers and my sisters, what would you think would be Hezekiah's response? He reads this letter. Is it that he gives way and surrenders to instant anxiety? Maybe his emotions become frozen and he is unable to choose an intelligent response. Does he surrender and submit to instant panic and frenzy in terms of considerations, knowing that whatever he might consider, given a serious record, none of it may work? What would you surmise would be Hezekiah's response? I only start this sermon this way because, in my estimation, you can tell an awful lot about a person's deepest beliefs and their most entrenched confidences when you get a chance to observe their first response to bad news. When you observe their first response to bone-chilling, step-freezing, lose-your-breath threats like Hezekiah reads in this letter. Well, much to my surprise, Hezekiah takes the letter and he doesn't surrender to anxiety. He doesn't submit to panic. He doesn't give way to weird and twisted thoughts. Y'all know what he did. He went to church. And when he got there, he lays the letter out before God. One scholar says that the best way you can image it is to imagine Hezekiah like a child who runs into the presence of a parent with a toy that has just been broken. And when that child gives that toy to the parent, they are doing so because they believe that parents can do anything. And that child brings that toy to the parent expecting that it's going to be fixed. Well, this is Hezekiah's posture, because make no mistake about it, he believes in God. He carries some real deep convictions that are evident in his reaction to the letter that he has just received. He knows that beliefs that people carried for the gods of the country that failed to Assyria, and he knows that gods were man-made. That their gods were man-made, that they were wood-carved expressions of the countries that created them. And Hezekiah balances that against the God to whom he now lays out this threatening letter. And he knows that he is convicted. He lives with this deep conviction. He knows that these other countries may have fallen to Assyria because their man-made wood-carved gods could not deliver them, but he is praying to the living God, the only God who is true, powerful, and almighty. Hezekiah knows this, and it prompts him in this scary time against the backdrop of serious threat, when other options certainly are available, but none of the other options are stronger than this one. It is a statement of his faith. It does testify to the depth of his belief, and it clearly lets you know where the king stands. Hezekiah believes in God, and Hezekiah trusts God in threatening circumstances, and it's his first response to good to bad news. It's this: he runs to church. He lays the letter out before God, and he utters a word of prayer. And while he knows, like you and I do, that God reserves the right to answer our prayers however God wants to, he prays believing that God will answer it in the way that he has requested. In fact, I am not making it up. Listen to the prayer again. God of Israel, seated in the majesty of cherubim, you are the one and only God, sovereign of all kingdoms on earth, maker of heaven, maker of earth. Open your eyes, your ears, God, and listen. Open your eyes and look. Look at this letter that's been sent from Sennacherib, a brazen insult to the living God. The facts are true, O God. The kings of Assyria have laid waste countries and kingdoms, huge bonfires they made of their gods. They are no gods handmade from wood and stone. But now, O God, our God, save us from raw Assyrian power. Make all the kingdoms on earth know that you are God, the one and only God. Listen. This is the message that I simply want to convey to you in a few minutes that are mine today. This text clearly teaches that prayer is, by definition, casting our wills before God. If you ask me the definition of prayer, that's it in a nutshell to me. It is casting our will before God. It is conversing with God about what your will is. Whatever imaginations that you have to talk to God about it, it's not always audibly. Sometimes it's mentally, quietly. It is to cast our wills to God. It is a statement of faith that my confidence is in God no matter what. It is the intervention that addresses fear and anxiety. All of these are fact and they are true. But I also want to argue and add to this conversation today that prayer is also the offering that I give to God, because I believe that prayer makes a difference and creates change. I want to argue that prayer is not just an exercise in eloquence. Prayer is not just the duty and discipline of the disciple, but I pray because I believe that when I cast my will before God and God hears my prayers, God answers my prayers, and God has a way to make change. I believe that prayer changes what is inevitable. I believe prayer defies what is evident. I believe that prayer challenges what appears obvious and that it offers alternatives when there appear to be none. Prayer reserves options that only faith in its very discipline can make available to us. Prayer has the ability to make things happen. Casting my will on God's strength, believing that God hears my expressions, that God cares about my concerns. It is taking everything in our mind, everything on our heart, and setting it before your God, releasing outcome and consideration and deliberation and determination to God. I may not know how God is going to answer, but I'm going to talk to God because I know that God will. And I know that however God decides to respond to my prayer is what is best for me. And I also believe that there is never no response to my prayer. Whenever I pray, God always responds, because no prayer goes unanswered, even if some are delayed. No prayer goes unanswered, even if they are not answered like I have articulated. The late great writer and philosopher, theologian Gilbert Keith Chesterton, One day, several of the literary figures were seated around a table amidst a larger gathering, and the question was asked to them: if you were on a stranded desert island and you could only have one book, what book would you prefer? Well, one writer without hesitation said, if I was stranded on that island, I want the complete works of William Shakespeare. But you know, in every crowd, there's always the person who, even if they're not real holy, they act real holy. They act lofty or holy. The next person, this person, stand up and say, if I was on a desert island, I can only and I could only take one book, I would want to take the Bible. Well, Chesterton was the theologian amongst the crowd, and you would have expected him perhaps to say that. But when they asked him one book on a desert island, stranded, can't get off, which book would you prefer? He said, well, I suppose I would choose Thomas's Guide to Practical Shipbuilding. You get it, don't you? Because in this instance, he is right. He needed specific instructions, and he knew that if you were on a desert island, it's too late for you to have the Bible in your hands trying to learn the content therein. You have to have the substance of the Bible already in your heart so that you can pray that God will get you off that island. God doesn't have to answer my prayers in the manner that I request, but I do have to believe that praying in it can produce the type of change that I need. This is what I'm pushing for us to consider today. Do you believe that God is even stirred by your prayers? Do you believe that God is moved by your prayers? Do you believe that God responds to your prayers? And the answer I know is an emphatic yes. You can trust that God does. This is not an exercise that simply becomes our gathered therapy free of charge between 10:45 and 11:45 every week. We are not listening today for therapy. You are here to shore up your theology. And I know that because I love God, I know that God hears and answers prayers. And when God answers, God can bring some radical change. Your ultimate position as a Christian is tested by the character of your prayer life. Don't tell me how deep you are as a Christian carrying lightweight prayers. If you're a deep Christian, you got some deep-weighted prayers. Don't tell me how much you know into what you've been exposed to in your life's experiences. If any of those things make you too smart to pray or make you delay your prayers. If you're so smart that you have to consider everything else but prayer, you aren't that smart after all. You have to pray because it should be the response that you have to terrible anticipations. Prayer should be what you do when you're facing what scares you and threatens you. Praying because it does take the care off of something of your emotionality and cast it on God, knowing that God cares for you. You pray because it does give you a chance to literally turn it over to God and let God work it out. And this text teaches that we also pray because we believe that prayer can make some things happen. Prayer can make things happen. It can make things happen. And if it can create change when the challenge and threat and concern is a Syrian size or a Syrian arrogant, then you have to believe that it will work for everything else in your life that needs change no matter what it is. And I'm not arguing today the value of prayer. I'm not trying to sermonically defend the reality of prayer. I am asserting and encouraging that you develop confidence in your prayer life. I'm not trying to get you to believe in the discipline of prayer. I'm not trying to get you to simply commit to the exercise of prayer. I'm not trying to get you to have so much confidence in your prayer that you would rather pray than to do anything else. You must believe that prayer anchors your confidence in God, the God who can actively intervene and overturn and insert God's will and exercise authority and flex muscles and demonstrate God's might. You pray because you expect something to happen. Whatever changes you're trying to make, whatever hurt that you're trying to get over, whatever answers you need, whatever door you are hoping will open, whatever threat you are about to face, whatever life adjustment that is being forced upon you. I don't care the size or the threat or the arrogance of it. I don't care the content of its threat in your life. You go to your closet and you pray about it. And I guarantee you that God will make some things happen just like God is doing for Hezekiah. Just like Hezekiah, you lay it out before God so that God can make something happen. And I preach this because I don't want you watering down prayer as an exercise, as just an expressed and demonstrated articulation, but absent any spiritual expectation that God will change according to what you pray for. You pray in your life because prayer changes things. Hezekiah prayed because Hezekiah believed that God could bring some resolve to what was going on in his life. This is how you know your God is worth your prayers, because your God can resolve some things. The worst thing in life for me is to pour my heart out in conversation to people who can't do anything about what I'm talking about. Hezekiah receives a letter, and his response to what he receives was to immediately run the church and to lay it out before God and to then offer up a prayer. He doesn't firm up his understanding of the current stockpile of his present military weaponry. He doesn't write a great and eloquent speech to motivate his fighting men and women. He doesn't sit down to pen something that negotiates and compromises with Assyria, though some theologians and scholars say that eventually Assyria decides not to attack Judah because they have a bigger threat with Egypt. I don't know what is true in terms of historical accuracy, but Hebrew history always tells her story to strengthen the legend of Judah. And Assyrian history is going to write her story to swell the legend of the Assyrians. I don't know whose facts were more accurate, but I do know who prayed. Hezekiah took this letter that threatened everything about his leadership. He wanted protection, but he also wanted a resolution. So he runs to church. He lays the letter before God, not because he was given a sign of resignation to impending defeat or feeling like this was not a strong response. He laid it out before God because he knew sharper than the weapons in the stockpile and more courageous than the courage of my military fighting men is the strength of my God who has created heaven and earth. This lady was out shopping, and she was hitting all of the local garage sales when she came across this old needlepoint picture that read, "Prayer changes things. Prayer changes lives." She reached into her purse, pulled out some money, and purchased it quickly and took it home. She began to look for just the right place in the house to hang this new painting that she had purchased, this awesome message, "Prayer changes lives." She made a decision after going in the dining room. She said, "I know where I'm going to put this picture. I'm going to hang this on the wall in the dining room so that when we sit at the table, we can read, 'Prayer changes lives.'" She waited excitedly for her husband to get from work, and that evening when he got home, she pulled him into the dining room, showed him the picture, but he made no indication one way or another as to whether he liked it or disliked it. The next day, she's going around cleaning the house. When she gets to the dining room, she notices that the picture is missing. She continues to clean the house and discovers that while she is cleaning, the picture is behind a bookcase. Now she thought, "Now that's strange. I know I didn't put that picture there." I hung it in the dining room, and she took it from behind the bookcase and she hung it back on the wall. The next day she was cleaning the house, and y'all can already guess, she goes into the dining room and that picture is missing again. Husband arrives home. She confronts him and pulls him into the dining room. She asked him if he was displeased with the art of the needlepoint, to which he responded, "Oh, no, not at all. That's a great work of art." She asks, "Is it the place where I hung it? Do you not like where I hung it up?" He says, No, that's a great location." She concludes then that it must be the message of the painting. And she asks him, "Does the message offend you? You don't like that prayer changes things, that it changes lives?" He says, No, the message is great." She says, "Well, then you have to tell me what is the problem." He said, "I don't like change." I know some of y'all missed it, but when you pray to God about something, you don't then talk to God, walk away, and not expect for something to happen. You talk to God, walk away, and start looking for things to happen, because God, not only does God hear prayers, but God answers them. Hezekiah says, "Pray." Hezekiah prayed because he was looking for something to be resolved. He also prayed because he felt the ability to be able to do it through privilege. Verse 15, he addresses God as the personal God of Israel. Hezekiah is saying that, "I took personal privilege to come to you, God, because you brought us into this very existence. We are because of you. I feel that it is a privilege to be able to cast my cares on you since you made me." One of the things that we were shaped into being when I was in the School of Theology, the idea was to create some theologians. In school, I was introduced to certain writers and theologians, one of them being Dietrich Bonhoeffer. I got a couple of his books on my bookshelf. There are some things, some stuff that Bonhoeffer has not had publicly published, but there's a book or a collection of some of those things that you can peer through to see some of the things that are not popular Bonhoeffer published materials. Recently, I saw somebody talking about some of those things, and I was shocked to learn that Bonhoeffer himself was very critical of pulpit preaching from American clergy. I also realized that Martin Luther King Jr. and others were as well. Hey, I even can be a critic of the pulpit sometimes. Bonhoeffer was a great author, and after reading a few of the things that the person made reference to, for a minute, I actually became offended by some of it. After preaching for 23 years, pastoring for 16, most of the time anchoring under the auspices of liberation theology and the writings of those like Bonhoeffer and others, I was amazed to see such a critique. Bonhoeffer mentioned in particular in one of his many trips to New York, he would visit the churches in New York, and one Sunday he wandered into the popular Riverside Church, and his commentary that night in his journal read, "The church was full, but the proclamation of Christ was anemic." He says that the problem of preaching is that it is so heavily social in his commentary, wanting fellowship amongst his members, that it forgets that what brings life to the church and life to the Christian is Christ alone. And if there is no proclamation of the Christ, then whatever is being preached is excessively light-weighted. And I thought about that, and I figured that I'm not going to be offended by that. I'm going to think on it, pray about it, and try to determine how many Sundays have I had to stand in this pulpit or stand in this pulpit, and in order to get people to respond pre-COVID, whether it was emotional or passionate or whether it was verbal or visual, what did I have to do? What do I have to do in order to get folk to make any decisions to accept that God, through prayer, that things can happen? And I promise myself, if it has to be built upon social commentary alone, then I am not helping our fellowship of disciples to grow and mature. That in itself will be a miserable gospel. Why? Because at the end of the day, what brings life to us is the very Christ who has redeemed us. Now, why am I saying this? Because this is where our praise gets weight. This is where our prayer and our praise gets weight, not because of what God privileges us to live with. Our prayer gets weight and our praise gets weight because what a privilege it is to have a relationship with a God of all creation. What a privilege when I can wake up in the morning. It was because God decided to let blood remain running warm in my veins, and whatever danger that was lurking last night and may have took somebody else, God said there was no harm that will come nigh your dwelling. It is a privilege that when you open your mouth, that God would even want to hear anything to come out of it. It is a privilege that when you gather for corporate or virtual worship, God says, I will make it conducive for healing and deliverance and breakthrough and revelation. What a privilege it is, my brothers and my sisters, to be in relationship with this type of God. What a privilege. And as much as we don't like to admit this, my love for God is heightened by the fact that I am privileged to have a personal relationship with God. Recently, I had a guy pass me on the aisle in the public on the Burnham. He said to me, "Hey, Rev, I know that you and God have a closer relationship than me and God. So say a prayer for me this week." And I stopped and said, "Bro, I'll pray for you, but you can pray for yourself, because as it relates to closeness, God is as close to you as God is to me." And listen, we don't get prayers through because the vocation is ministry. We get prayers through because we are children of God. It doesn't matter how long it took you to come to salvation, God still hears your prayers. It doesn't matter how many days you were in the street or were acting stupid or making messed up decisions. It doesn't matter when you open your mouth. When you open your mouth, the living God hears and answers your prayers too. You don't need to wait to get to somebody that you think is a strong saint to get a prayer through. I don't care if you've got a master's or a PhD, a high school diploma, or an equivalency. I don't care if you dropped out after the 7th grade. If you open your mouth to God, God hears and God answers prayers. God, I wish that sometimes we would just get that it's not about position, it's about your closeness, and God hears all of us. Prayers make things happen. There's a brother by the name of George Mueller. George Mueller one day looked down the streets of Bristol, England, and he saw hundreds of homeless children. He was so moved and touched and compelled and burdened, concerned for them, that he decided that he had to do something. He reached in his pocket, counted his little bit of money, and decided that he was going to start an orphanage. He pulled from what he had in his pockets, 2 cents at the time, the story says. And yet, over the course of 60 years, starting with 2 cents, George Mueller took care of more than 10,000 orphans. He looked out and saw homeless kids. He could have said, you know, I can't do anything. I don't have enough money. There's no way to care for them, to meet their needs, to provide their daily sustenance every day. Instead, Mueller looked at them and said, therefore, I will reach out and help. And God blessed his efforts in a mighty way. What is interesting is this: whenever he would tell the story of the success of the orphanage, it would always, out of his own mouth, come out as the result of answered prayers. So much so that he kept a record of his prayers, and his prayer records filled what some have said to be more than 3,000 pages. His notes show that more than 30,000 of his prayers he believed God had answered. One night in that journal, the journal that he had been writing in, he had a note that there was no food in the orphanage to give to the children for breakfast the next day. But at 3 a.m. in the morning, while I was praying, a baker called me up and said, I can't sleep. I'm going to go down to the bakery and bake some bread. Is it okay if I bring some hot, fresh baked bread over to the orphanage in the morning? He said one night he was praying and the milk truck broke down right in front of the orphanage. On that day, he had run out of milk. And the truck driver knocked on the door and said, I know that this is going to sound strange, but I have this truck out here and it broke down. It's going to take a long time for the repair truck to show up. And so before the milk begins to spoil, I know you may not need it, but do you mind if I can bring some of the milk in off of the truck and store it in the orphanage? Time and time again, 30,000 times over 60 years, God answered Mueller's prayers. And this is what I want for you. I want you to be able to live your life telling stories about how God was able to answer your prayers, how God was able to wake people up in the middle of the night, how God was able to allow trucks that broke down to break down right in front of you to service your needs. I want you to be able to tell some folk that because of prayers, doors swung open, unexpected blessings came your way. Thoughts were generated that came out of nowhere, because it's true. You didn't know how, but you did know who. You didn't know how it was going to work out, but you knew who to go to in order to get it so that it would work out. Hear me today. Prayer makes things happen. Of course, Hezekiah prayed because he knows that at the end of the day, God brings all things together. God is bringing all things into intended perfection for your life. The word consummate, it means every season of your life divinely ordered to bring you to an intended perfection. I'm talking about seasons where you thought death was imminent. I'm talking about what you would do as you describe some of the hardest days of your life. And yet God brings it all together for an intended perfection. Now, you and I know what is God's ultimate goal, and it's not for you to hit the lottery. God's ultimate goal is to bring you closer to eternity, perfectly reflecting Jesus Christ, who has redeemed you by the shedding of the blood. Now, in pursuit of that perfect goal completion, God is intervening. God is inserting God's presence. God is exacting God's will in your life, including in places that bring threat to that intended coming together, which is why the battles are not yours. So when I pray, my prayers are surrenders to God's will to work God's purposes in my life, because I want God to bring me to ultimate perfection, even if some of the roads that lead to it are roads that I would not want to walk on. Now, let me end this sermon with a story. This man, this family tells a story of being in a restaurant. They are the only family with the child in the restaurant. They sit at a table. They order a high chair. They bring their bubbling, excited baby child, put them in the high chair. They notice that everybody is sitting quietly talking. And all of a sudden, their child hollers out, hello, hello, Hello repeats it, pounding his little hands on the high chair top, eyes wide open, mouth open. He was wiggling in the chair, giggling. Parents look around to see what's going on, and they realize that the source of their child's excitement was a man who appeared across the other side of the restaurant. This man appeared to be disheveled, possibly homeless. They could make, based upon their own assessments, he looked dirty. Hair hadn't looked like it had been brushed. He had dirt stains all over his face. But he was engaging their child. He was speaking to them. Hello, hey there, big boy. The parents were befuddled. They didn't know what they were going to do. The two, the older man and the young child, kept speaking to each other. People started looking at the baby and they started looking at the man. People started getting upset. The man was talking to the child, working the child into such a frenzy that it began to get the attention of everybody in the restaurant. But it didn't matter to the man, nor did it matter to the young boy. They kept engaging each other. The man started to do some long distance patty caking with the boy. He started to play peekaboo with the young man. The assessment was the man possibly was drunk, but he kept this child entertained, and the child entertained the man. Eventually, the meal ended, and the parents tried to exit as quickly as possible. The man said, let me run to the car and get it and pull it up to the front. You run and pay as quickly as possible so we can get out of here and stop causing such a disturbance. The old man, though, had positioned himself at the place of exit from the restaurant. The woman who stayed inside began to pray that God would rescue her. She headed toward the door with the bubbly baby in her arm, and the closer the young baby got to the man, the more excited the baby became. And before the mother knew it, the man stood up, speaking to the baby, and the baby was moving out of the mama's arms, and the baby stretched out his arms and leaped from the mother to the man. Now, this was freaking the woman out, because at this point she had gotten closer. She could smell the man, she could see the man, and she was thinking all kinds of things about the man. But what she was missing was there was a connection with this child and this man. Eventually, the child laid his head on the old man's shoulders, and the man who had connected with the child started to cry. Tears began to stream down his face as he held this little boy. He began to caress and stroke his back, connecting with him. He rocked him and cradled him. They laughed and they hugged each other. The man said to the parent as he handed the child back, now you take care of this gift. The woman, who at the time now was starting to feel bad, took the child back. The smell was bad on her child, but the man exited the restaurant saying, God bless you, ma'am. You've given me the greatest gift for Christmas. The man left and the woman left, and she went to the car. The husband was wondering what was up, while the woman was muttering, God, please forgive me. She got in the car and told the husband that she had just seen the love of God through their child. A child who smelled no stench, who saw no filth, a child who was not looking with blinded eyes, a child who could see clearly that this man needed some love and attention, that she was a Christian who went to church week by week but was blind, and here was a child who was not old enough to say much beyond hello, but she saw the love of God through a baby. She shared her son for a moment, just like God has shared God's son for eternity. And I'm telling you, God has shared God's son so that we could see deeper into the soul of each other. God shared God's son so that just like this child, we could see what God was trying to do. And the best way that we can see is to stay connected to God, stay connecting to God through prayer, staying connected to God through our focus for what God has for our lives and the intentionality that comes with it. That's how I want to end the sermon today. I want you to see the world through the eyes that God has for you. And the best way that you do that is to stay connected to God, because prayer can make those type of things happen. As heads are bowed, eyes are closed, to God, we thank you for the word today. We appreciate you for 2 Kings 19 chapter, verse 14 through 19. We thank you, God, for the actions of Hezekiah. We appreciate you, Lord. We love you. We honor you. You are a great God. Now I pray that this word may have convicted somebody, and if so, move in their lives. That's our prayer. Amen. Prayer changes things, my brothers and my sisters. Prayers can make things happen. If you are listening today, you're watching, and you don't know this God that we are in relationship with, we offer you this opportunity, and we do it virtually. We offer you this opportunity to be connected to the family of Christ. And we would love to have you here at 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church as members of the body. But if you don't want to go here, we'll send you to where you want to go. We just want you to get connected. And so if you're listening by way of dial pad, you're watching by way of Facebook, Twitter, and you want to be saved, then you can respond several ways. You can just hit us up in the chat, wave the hand, or just say, it's me, I need to be saved. Or you can send us a direct message, or you can give us a call, 804-648-7511, or email me, pastor, Pastor, at SMZBC.org. If that's you, respond. I pray today's word blessed you, and I pray that as we continue to virtually have worship, that you're trying to do the best that you can to stay connected in your relationship with God. There are a couple things that I want to share. First of all, join us for prayer Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. Tuesday and Thursday mornings at 7 a.m. Area code 804-203-9011. Join us for a quick devotional as we get updates on who we need to be praying for in our fellowship. Join us as we are challenged at least 2 out of 5 days during the work week for God to move in our lives, Tuesdays and Thursdays. We're still on our break for the summer for Bible study and church school, but we'll be returning sometime during the middle of September to those activities. So that you can stay in tune, Tuesdays and Thursdays are our prayer days. Friday, if you need groceries on Friday, we're here, 12:45 p.m., 12:45 to 2 p.m. We'll be giving out groceries on this upcoming Friday. We sent you a couple of emails this week. For those of you who don't have email addresses, we're going to mail you out a survey. There's an important church survey that we need you to fill out. We need you to fill it out. We're trying to update our database. Much of our information changes. Persons change their telephone number, they change their addresses. And the first thing that you think about is not to update the church. And so real quickly, it's going to take you a couple minutes to go to that email that was sent out and fill it out. Fill it out. Parents, fill it out for your children. Fill it out for yourself. Remind people that you are in connection with to fill out that survey. We need it. Right now, we only have about 10 or 15% of our members who fill the survey out. We need you to fill it out. There are also some other questions there. We're trying to have a gift for you when you return to worship. So those of you who are motivated by free gifts, and bam, there you go. You get a free gift if you fill it out. But ultimately, you want to just fill it out because you want to do what's right. And we need that information so that we can continue to move forward here. We're making progress here at the church. And so hopefully by the time you return, there will be some things that are completed. The project in itself will not be finished until the middle of October. The middle of October. But by the time we come back, there's some things that will be done. And we are excited about those things. If you missed the offering call prior to worship, if you missed the offering call prior to the song and the sermon, then now is the opportunity to give. I preached last week about your giving, and that prompted many of you to give. I didn't do that this week, but I pray that the appeal prompts you to give. We need you to continue to give. The summer months are always really difficult for us. And we had a horrible July. We had the highest spending month and the lowest revenue month. So go figure what that looks like. And we're trending that month. We're trending that way again for the month of August. So give your tithe, give your offering. If you got something sacrificially that you can give. We need it so that we can continue to do the work that God is calling us to do here at the 6 Mount Zion Baptist Church. And finally, there are two things that are impacting us returning back to worship. The first thing is the building. Honestly, we don't have working bathroom capacity right now. We will by the time we return September the 19th, at least one floor. But even if we wanted to return right now, we couldn't. But another thing that is frightening us, starting to scare us, is the numbers. Richmond Times-Dispatch this week, and then nationally, you continue to see the numbers increasing. Emergency rooms are over capacity. There are still persons who are choosing not to get the vaccine. And here's the thing, even for the persons who've gotten the vaccine, you got to be safe. More and more, I'm hearing cases, persons who've gotten the vaccine that I personally know. Even right now, I know somebody who's in the hospital who got the vaccine. And so there are breakthrough cases that are happening. Now, the numbers are low. And they're low, 1-2% in some cases out of 100. That's low, but it doesn't mean that it's not possible. And so, for those of you who are vaccinated, keep your eyes and ears open. There will be some booster shots availability that will come forward in the next month or two for those of you who are willing to get that. And then for those of you who haven't gotten the vaccine at all, please go get it. Go get it. The more people that are vaccinated, I feel like we can kind of curve some of this activity. And so we continue to say that, I'm not stupid. I know, there's some people say that the church is waiting, and everybody. And I know, I see your pictures out there. I see you at the beach. I know you're doing your thing. You're out in the world. I get it. But we do want to create an environment of safety here. That's why we're trying to encourage everybody. And when we return, we will have protocol and we will have things in place that will try to make this as safe an environment as possible for people who decide to come back to worship. And those of you who decide not to at this point, then you continue to tune in at 10:45 on Sunday mornings. Thank you, my brothers and my sisters, for worshiping with us on this Sunday, this fourth Sunday. God bless our children and our youth. Thank God for Minister Miles and for Reverend Butler and for Tamika, and I think that's Krishan up there. Everybody that's working to continue to try to make us or help us to bring these services to you. Join us Tuesday, 7 o'clock, Thursday, 7 o'clock. Give if you can. The gifts are needed. Friday, we're here giving out groceries. God bless you. I'll see you next Sunday, 10:45. Same place. God bless you.